but I named it Celine Dion because when I was in the hospital, my stepdaughter had leukemia, and my husband said, so when the kids go into the hospital, all the doctors tell them to name their pole and their IV, so it's not so scary. So my feeding
Yeah.
tube was Freddie Mercury because it was Freddie Free feeds Heather, and then my heart
Okay.
monitor I named Celine Dion because my heart will go on.
My heart will go on. I love it. I actually got that before you said it. That's
Ah,
amazing. I
God,
love it.
I crack myself up. I find myself very
Do you
entertaining.
feel like you're barely keeping your head above water? That no matter how hard you try, meaningful progress remains out of reach? Heather gets that. She battled an eating disorder for years before seeking help. Now in recovery, Heather is here to tell you that positive change is possible even when it doesn't feel that way. Join her as she shares openly about her struggles and small triumphs. Fair warning though, Heather doesn't hold back. Her candid story may trigger some. But for those wanting honesty, hope, and healing, this is 1% Better with Heather. The information and stories shared on 1% Better are based on host Heather's personal experiences with eating disorders and mental health challenges. Heather is not a licensed doctor, therapist, dietitian, or other health professional. Her advice and opinions should not be taken as professional medical advice. Please consult your physician or a qualified health provider regarding any medical or health-related issues. 1% Better also contains descriptions of eating disorders that may be triggering for some listeners. Discretion is advised.
Hey there, my little gaffers, and welcome to 1% Better with Heather. On today's episode, I have a very special guest. Dana Diaz is here. Welcome, Dana.
Hi there.
Hi, thank you for being here with us. So we'll just jump right in and I'll get you to introduce yourself.
Absolutely. I am just a normal human being like everybody else, just trying to make my way in this world. But I've had some very unfortunate lifelong experience with narcissistic abuse. And at the end of my former marriage, I decided, why not turn my journal into a book so that other people that maybe have been in similar experiences can relate? Because I actually thought I was like the only person that could possibly be experiencing the craziness and the chaos that actually ended up making me physically ill, as well as having the mental, issues of depression, anxiety. I had an eating disorder and, the PTSD and all this stuff. But I just think it's really important for people to be aware of it because, in society, at least here where I am in the States, there's like no justice for what these people do. And what they do should be criminal because I shouldn't need a black eye or some physical evidence of somebody's assault on me to get justice for the things that they have otherwise done. Because that's the one thing about narcissistic abuse that people don't realize is it's not just, that somebody is physically abusing you or verbally abusing you or manipulating you or controlling you. They're sexually abusing you, possibly. There's legal abuse, financial abuse. It just anything they can do to fulfill their ego and overpower you and dominate you to get whatever it is that they want, they will do. And it's so damaging to the person that falls prey to that.
So let's go back in time to childhood. Um, how did this all, because how did this all start?
Well, it's for me in my life, it started as a child. I had the misfortune of being born to a mother who was an unwed teenager. So, I mean, needless to say, it was a time that, when it wasn't okay to do that. So there was a lot of shame that she felt about it. She was ridiculed publicly and within her family. And I don't dismiss that she went through a difficult time with that. The part where it went wrong for me was that she had me, she chose to keep me, and basically I've been paying for her shame my whole life. It's just taken me, unfortunately, 40 some years to realize this. So, growing up in a situation where my mother is emotionally detached from me, physically detached. I mean, she was not soothing or nurturing by any means. My, my emotional needs particularly were neglected by her. But then she married a man who was not my biological father, and he was older, was obsessed with money and things and status and all this. I didn't know what a narcissist was back then because I was just a kid, but I could clearly see that this is somebody who put his value and his own worth in materialistic, things. And he had no care whatsoever for me or my mother, but he particularly didn't like me because I wasn't his child. And as he told me, among many other things that he said, he shouldn't have to pay for a child that wasn't even his. Basically, my expenses, food, shelter, clothing, were taking away from his ability to drive fancy sports cars and wear fancy clothes and have fancy things. And that was like such a great offense to him, that I suffered for it verbally, physically, and then I had the added bonus of my mother letting it happen, turning her head to it, pretending it wasn't happening, even gaslighting me at the time when I would go to her and say, this happened, or didn't you just see what he did to me? Didn't you just see oh, well, you shouldn't make him angry and you shouldn't provoke him. And I would love when she would tell me, well, he wouldn't be so angry with you if he didn't love you so much. So she's telling this to a little girl. So, I mean, I go through years and years of basically being told by this man that I'm nothing, nobody, I'm incompetent, incapable, never, 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 can't. I mean, to say I was diminished and had no self-esteem is an understatement. But on top of that, having the physical, abuse that followed to make me feel like the nothing that they thought me to be. Obviously, I went out into the world at 18 trying to get away from them and vowing to myself that I'd never be mistreated again. But unfortunately, being a codependent, people-pleasing, desperate for love, kind of a girl. And it's sad that I was raised to be that way. But the problem with that is that it was like serving me up on a silver platter to a narcissist, because that's what happened. I leave my house thinking that's never going to happen. I'm going to be different. I'm going to be strong. I'm in control of my life. And what do? I fall for another narcissist because he saw me. They can detect you a mile away. They see your vulnerability. They see your eagerness to please. They see that you are just desperate for any crumb of affection or attention. So they start dangling things in front of you. Certainly in any relationship, there's courtship involved, but with narcissists, they know what to say, they know what to do. So we call this love bombing, but for somebody that has been starved of love and deprived of any kind of attention or affection, you think that, this is the best person in the entire world. You think like all your wishes have been granted and that this is the person who's promising you everything that is going to fulfill all of those things for you. So of course I fell for it. Even though the first time I met him, I knew that there was something about him. There was something about this guy that reminded me too much of my abusive stepfather. But I still went for it because there was nobody else. I had no other options. Nobody else was asking me out. And I was kind of turning it around just like I did in my childhood, like my mother had taught me to do, that, oh, it must be me. Maybe I'm being too judgmental. Maybe I'm misperceiving things. But when things started happening with him that still caused me to feel unrest, which we would call a red flag, I was still doing exactly what my mother did, which was enabling, excusing, and tolerating. Well, maybe he had a bad day. Maybe, I just should remember not to do this that way because that upsets him. And so I was making it about me when really, this was just a human being that we were like oil and water. It just wasn't mixing.
So really, you were set up to fail from day one.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we can all go in being like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I know the signs, but you made a very good key point. Your whole life, you were told if this person didn't talk to me like this, they didn't love me. So how do you not go after a person like that? Because that equals love.
Exactly.
Even though that you do know better, but we all want affection at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And we don't have self-esteem or anything, self-worth, nothing. So of course we're going to go to what our normal is. And unfortunately, that was your normal.
Exactly. And the reality is that, I mean, I remember in high school, a very nice boy asked me out, and he was so nice and he was so cute. I couldn't even believe that he was interested in me. But I mean, from all appearances, I mean, my gosh, he was like a dream come true. But I said no to him because I was scared, because I didn't know what to do with a nice boy. If somebody wasn't, I mean, we all like a little bit of a bad boy, let's be real, but we don't actually want them to be bad to us. You know what I mean? And there was this thing about this kid that he was just so nice. And I was like, I don't know what to do with a nice boy that comes from a nice family. I don't know how to deal with that. That doesn't resonate in my head with me. Like, it was almost boring to me too. Like, I don't know what to do with you. But I think that people mistake too. Like, there's this thing called a trauma bond, but there is actually statistical evidence that shows, and I'm not a scientist, but it's very interesting to me, that cortisol, the stress hormone that runs through your body when you're in like fight or flight mode and all those kinds of situations, that your body can become addicted to it when it is used to it going through your body at such high levels, to the point that when things are calm and you don't have that stress hormone running through your body, sort of makes you anxious and sort of causes you to engage in self-sabotaging behaviors or conflict, so that you get that cortisol going. It's kind of like, somebody that's addicted to heroin looking for their fix. Like, your body is like, go get it, go find it, go start up with somebody. And I can tell, I've even done it in my current marriage, even knowing full well what I'm doing early on, because I'm remarried to a wonderful man now who is gentle and peaceful and everything I need in this world. But early on, I remember it was something stupid over a bottle of ketchup that I just started up with him, and I was relentless. And he just stood there with his hand against the wall, staring at me with a smirk on his face. And then I finally stopped because I realized he wasn't reacting. He wasn't giving me that conflict that I was looking for. He would not fight with me. And I finally stopped, and he's like, "Are you done?" And I'm like, kind of pouty, like a little 2-year-old, like I want to stamp my feet or, whatever. And I'm like, I guess. And then that's when I realized, like, he put his arm around me and we went ahead and had dinner with that stupid bottle of ketchup that I had to buy. But it was such a dumb thing. But that is what my childhood did to me, essentially, is make me at 45 years old fight with a gentle, peaceful man over nothing about a bottle of ketchup. But that's where that stupid stuff comes from. And I don't think people give enough credit to, like, we understand mental distress from, abusive situations and toxic relationships. We understand even the physical symptoms that come from that mental distress. But I don't think we realize that our body chemistry, like, literally sometimes will not let us out of that cycle, which leads to a whole discussion about, why do people stay in these situations? Well, there's a million reasons, but one of them that never really gets attention is the fact that our bodies really have become addicted in themselves, whether we want to intellectually leave or not. Our bodies are like, no, you're not going anywhere, because look at how many times women leave an abusive partner or a toxic partner and they go back and they're on again, off again, on again, off again. They just can't get away from them. That's a trauma bond.
So it's like, because I don't even want to know what my cortisol levels are, but I understand so your body's confused really at the end of the day, because if there's not stuff going on, if we're not in that panic mode, when everything's calm, I'm always like, something bad's going to happen. Something bad's going to happen, right? You're always waiting for the other shoe to drop.
That's your anxiety. Yep. It's
right?
Looking for something.
And I'm like, clearly something, this all can't be going good. Like, it can't go good. Like, a piano is going to fall on my head, right? Like, so
right.
I totally understand how, like, people go back to this. And people are also so broken. And we talked about the money, but we'll get to that in a second. But I just have a question about when you were raised with your stepfather. Did you ever have friends or other family members? Like, did you have cousins? Did he have parents? Were they nice to you? Like, did you know that this is not how life was supposed to be? Like clearly, like you're in like a shit
I
situation.
did. So here's the fortunate part of my life. The reason that my mother kept me, because Lord knows I've heard throughout my life very openly, I've been referred to as an accident and a mistake, and she wishes she could have aborted me and all these lovely things that you probably shouldn't share with your child. The reason that she ultimately kept me, which everybody in the family openly talks about as well, is that my grandma and my great grandma, so my mother's mother and her grandmother, were at the hospital, and they said, over our dead bodies, are you giving this child up for adoption or, ridding of her in any way? We are not going to let our only grandchild, our very first great grandchild, be raised by strangers. So they made an agreement with my mother, basically told my mother, we'll take her off your hands. Grandma said, I'm young enough, I'll go get a job, I'll pay for everything for her. Great grandma, well, she was old anyway, she's always at home. So she said, I'll take care of the baby. So that's how my life was. I would have never even known that my mother was my mother unless I was forced to go live with her when I was a little bit older, because I was so very loved by my great grandma. My grandma was always busy working, and her marriage was a whole other thing, which I learned later. I didn't realize as a child what she was going through, but I was with my great grandma. I lived with her. She took care of me. All my memories as a child were with her. If I needed soothing at night, if I was crying, if I had a boo-boo, she was the one who kissed it. She was the one who rocked me. She fed me. She clothed me. She bathed me. She took care of me. For all purposes, she was my mother. I mean, I was a kid, but I watched cartoons. I saw movies. I saw other people interact. We're not blind or stupid. We can see things. So in my mind, I thought she was my mother, only I called her Gram because she was my great grandma, and I didn't think anything of it. I'm actually in the process of finishing up my book about my childhood where I talk about this, but it really wasn't until a kid at my preschool said something to me like, why weren't you at the daddy-daughter dance? And I was like, well, I just don't have a dad. Like, I didn't even think anything of it. I'm like, I don't have a dad. And they're like, well, what about your mom? And I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, I have a mom. I have Graham. Like, I didn't know that I was different. But yeah, it was good that I had that basis, that foundation. But when I went to live with my mother, and this man that she was marrying moved us, how far from our family and friends out to a totally different area. We knew nothing, knew nobody. There was nobody Hispanic like us. They were all, primarily Caucasian and Jewish. And it was very hard for me because my mother was like, stop rolling your R's. And she was straightening of course, now I straighten my hair anyway, but she was straightening our curly hair. Like, we had to wear Gap clothes instead of the frilly floral stuff that my grandma was putting me in. It was like, no, we're going to pretend we're Caucasian. Nobody needs to know we're Puerto Rican. Start talking like that, start fitting in. But the problem was I never fit in. And I knew I didn't fit in, not just with her and not just with her husband, but not anywhere. But I recognized it because I had that foundation with my grandma. With my grandma, I knew love. My uncles, my two uncles, my mother's brothers, were always with me as well. So they treated me well. And eventually, like, I went to school and I would make friends and I would go to their houses for sleepovers. So yeah, I would see not all of their families were very happy and functional, but the ones that were, I could see, how there was respect and affection between a couple versus, ooh, there's problems in that house. Like, they're getting divorced. And, that was about when, like, in the early 80s, when it was starting to be kind of okay to even say the word divorce. So totally different time. But it's interesting that, yes, I was observing the differences, not just with my friends, but knowing what love really was from my own foundation, to know that it wasn't there with my mother and with my stepfather, and then going forward in other relationships. But, you know, being raised that way in the home with my mother and stepfather, unfortunately, I was with them for more years than I ever was with my great grandma, that no matter how much I fought it, well, every time I opened my mouth, I would, get a physical consequence. But no matter how much I fought it, even mentally, no matter how much I told myself it was wrong and that I deserved better and I could be better, I internalized it. I was internalizing their shame that they held towards me for the fact of not being their biological child together, and for whatever shame my mother had for having had me so young to begin with.
So I have a question. Was your stepdad Caucasian? Or
Yeah.
so now this kind of makes sense. So not only are you not good enough, but and I'm going to say this wrong, and ethnicity, your background, your DNA is wrong too, right? So
everything about me was wrong. And it's, yes. And you and I have the same, way of thinking. And so you'll appreciate when this book comes out. I do have a sense of humor about it at one point in my book, because I was like, we go into all these different things that happened in my childhood, where my mother always talked about how she thought I was going to be a boy. And so I kept thinking when I was a kid, I came out the wrong gender. My bad, my mistake. But I actually did feel bad. I thought it was my fault that I wasn't born the boy that she wanted. And I wasn't anything, like nothing I could do was right. And then here's another kicker that I'll give you about this book. My mother had her tubes tied immediately after I was born. I was born on her 17th birthday as well, which was a whole other irony of my life.
Yeah, I know you're really screwed.
You have no idea. But the fact that she had her tubes tied immediately after I was born tells me I don't think she just didn't want me. I don't think she wanted kids at all, because my observations of her over my life, like you see women who, my God, if they see a baby in a carrier or in a stroller, oh, baby. My mother was not one of those people. She was not like, real excited over babies. She was always like a little kind of like kept them at a distance, like, I'm good. So the irony of everything else as well, which I talk about very heavily in my book, is that when she got married, because I was not this man's child, he decided he wanted his own biological child with her. And she went through like 6 years of procedures and surgeries to have her tubal ligation reversed. She had 16 miscarriages before she finally gave birth to a viable fetus. My brother was full term, but this man told me a few months before his child was born that once that baby was born, they were going to be a family, the three of them, and I was not a part of that. And so to have known from the get-go from both of them that, I was all wrong. Nothing I could do was right. Nothing I could say was right. My existence was wrong. I was a bother, a burden. Then to have to watch them basically go through all this, struggle to replace me because I wasn't upholding my end of the family bargain or something. You have to look at I was internalizing a lot as a kid, and in the midst of all this, I'm being verbally abused and physically abused, and I'm being picked on at school because I'm the different kid. I'm not like everybody else. And I didn't understand why it wasn't okay just to be me, because I struggled with, well, I'm fine when I'm in the city. I'm fine when I'm with Graham. I'm fine when I'm with my uncles and my family. But no, to go back to your question, with my stepfather's family, it was weird because not only did I feel completely out of place, some of them were very courteous and very polite, and they did try. I was a kid, but they tried. They would talk to me. They were pleasant and friendly. But my mother, like my mother was always socially awkward anyway. Like she didn't seem to be concerned with having friends. She didn't seem to have any. So she had a hard time relating to people. All she ever did was work. She was too busy working to do anything else. But once she got with her husband, it was like he was a lot older. So all he had were his siblings because both of his parents were deceased. But his siblings, he was the youngest of the five siblings, I believe, or the fourth to the youngest. So they were all much older than my mother. My mother had nothing in common with them. They would blatantly insult her and make jokes about Hispanic people in front of her and in front of me. And, my mother was often very offended by them. And there was always this rift to where eventually my mother just didn't want to go to anything with no holidays, no nothing, which I was fine with because despite our, strained relationship, who else did I have? I mean, that was my mother. I just assumed I had to side with her and be loyal to her. And honestly, I just assumed she would protect me basically from any angst that I would have in life, including anything having to do with this man and his family.
So what's the age gap between you and your half brother?
14 years.
That's a big gap. So
yeah,
I just can't even believe any doctor. Well, this is America for you. No offense, America, but money, 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 right? Like when they did stuff back in the 70s, that was it, man. Like it's like I can't even believe anyone would be like, nope, sorry, you're out of luck. Like we're not even going down this road. And that's before in vitro. That's before everything that we have right now, really. I can't even imagine the money that they spent on that. Like, oh my God.
I know. And for somebody that was so to say he loved, I mean, I will stand by it to this day. That man loved money more than anything else, above else. Money was it. So if he put his money towards something, that was because he had to have it. Like he was intent on having, and he had to. He was one of those people that if the neighbors got a new TV, I'm not even kidding you. We had to get one that was an inch bigger. Mm-hmm. If the neighbors got a new car, he had to get a new car, but with more options or a better brand. It was what he was literally like always the one-upper, had to be better. They even did it with me when I moved out as an adult. I remember I bought some furniture. They went out and bought very similar furniture, just more expensive and better quality. And it was like, I'm your kid. Why are you competing? Like, I didn't even know this was a competition. But that always have to be more and better. And it was always about money. So of course he had to have a kid. And of course I knew it was made so clear to me that the spawn of his loins was like, it was like the Messiah was coming, literally. But try being the kid that already lives there and already gets treated like crap, always gets treated like a piece of garbage, knowing that this other kid's coming, the Messiah's coming because you didn't cut it.
Yeah,
that's a very, very hard thing to work through.
That's got that's a whole lot of therapy. I'll say this though, as we're talking, when you said, because you were a girl and everything too, he didn't like you. My spidey senses tell me that if you were a boy, you probably would have not made it out alive.
Well, it was a wonder I made it out alive at all, honestly. And I don't want to give too much away because we got to leave some suspense for the book. But there was a life insurance policy taken out on me when I was 12 years old. There were things that happened in the house. And one night there was something that happened where I honestly did think I was going to lose my life. I did lose consciousness. I was strangled and thrown down some stairs, and I thought that was it. And unfortunately, child services didn't do a damn thing for me. And I'm going to say this with that, again, I don't want to get too much into that, not because of personal things, but because, I got to leave a little something for people to read. But the saddest part to me about all of that is since the release of the book that I have out, which is about my former marriage to a narcissist, And in which there are some sprinkles of things with my mother and stepfather from my adult life. Barely a sprinkle, though, because there's a lot of stories there even. But since that book has come out, I have unfortunately been propelled from isolation into more of a public spotlight. And I have had people that knew me in the past resurface and contact me. And probably one of the hardest phone calls I've ever had to get from somebody was, gosh, it was probably late last fall. It was a few months after my book came out. Somebody called me and said, "Do you know who this is?" And I recognized the voice, but I couldn't quite place it. Anyway, she said who she was. It was a lady who had cut my hair probably for, gosh, from the time I was about 5 or 6 until I was about 20 years old in college. So, I mean, she knew me a long time. And just a lovely lady. She was always very doting on me, much more so. My mother, I would have never said she never doted on me. It was a wonder I even got to have my hair cut, but it was all about appearances with my mother. So this lady says to me in this phone call last year, she says, so the next thing she says, once she identified herself, she said, "I'm so glad to know that you're alive." And I said, "Why would you say that?" Because I certainly, especially when I was a kid, I did not tell anybody what was going on. I had a couple close friends that I told some stuff, but I never told everybody everything. And she said, "Well, I could just always tell by the way she said, your mother was always, always so melancholy. Like she would smile, and I said, yeah, I know. There was like deadness in her eyes. It's like she was dead inside, like just going through motions." And she said, "Yeah, but she said, I never really knew your stepfather, but she said, I knew people who knew him. And she said, I always thought I'd see you on the news that you were found dead in a ditch somewhere and maybe that he killed your mother too." And that hurt me so bad, not just that somebody else saw it. I mean, I was partially glad somebody saw it, but then it made me wonder how many other people saw what was going. I mean, I'm getting chills right now because I did honestly think that I was going to die especially that one night that I'm speaking of. I swear to God, he was going to kill me. I knew he wanted to get rid of me. I knew it. I didn't know he would go to the lengths of killing me, but to know that other people were seeing this, but nobody did anything. Nobody stepped in. Nobody said anything back then. And I think that's my biggest problem with it now, because I see situations even in my adult life, even with my ex-husband, and even, I hate to say, with a family member in my husband's family now, that everybody sees it, everybody knows it's happening, but nobody says anything. They just pretend like, oh, that's just the way the person is, and that's just not okay with me. It's not okay. It's not okay to just, I mean, to me, that's enabling. If you're going to let a toxic person bully or harm, whenever there's intentional harm involved, that's where I draw the line. You don't get to do that to other human beings and get away with it. And so many people do.
Well, I hope someone did phone, because if CPS came to your house and it was what a horrible thing happened to you and they wouldn't take you away, I'm going to assume if someone phoned and said, we think this is going on, they went like, yeah, all right, click. Right?
Well,
so
CPS did get involved after I went to school the day after that night that I thought I was going to die. CPS did get involved. And you know what happened? I was sent right back home because all they did was interview some neighbors and interview some of my mother and stepfather's employees. They owned their own business. Well, why would their employees be stupid enough to say anything badly about them? And of course, they're outstanding and generous and wonderful. And the neighbors said all the same.
Because they don't want to rock through their window, right? Like,
yeah. So it was me. I
Yeah.
was the one that was the problem. I was difficult. I was defiant. And honestly, my mother and stepfather, I sat across from them at the police station, and my mother was doing the whole act of, sniffling and pretending she was so sad and didn't know what to do with me. And my stepdad had his arm around her like, oh, poor us. We're the victims of this girl who's just so defiant and rebellious. And I'm just going to tell you right now, you know what? Teenagers are teenagers. Was I a peach? I was pretty damn close to one, honestly. I had a mouth on me because I would get frustrated at the way they would invalidate me and the way that they refused to see me and refused to love me. But let me tell you, I was in all honors classes. I'm not, I feel like I'm bragging now, but like I never smoked anything in my life. I never did a drug in my life. I didn't drink. I went to a party once because I felt like I should, because that's what kids do. But I called a cab to leave because I didn't want to get drunk and I didn't want to have sex and I didn't want to do all this stuff that all these other kids were doing. Like, I was a good girl. I was a really good girl. I was like in bed at 8 o'clock at night because I couldn't stay up past then on my own. Like, I was a good kid and I just couldn't understand why they couldn't love me. But I spent so much of my childhood and even in my adult life overachieving and striving for more. What can I do to make them notice me? What can I do to make them proud of me? To this day, I am 48 years old, and I am sitting here telling you that I have never, out of my mother or stepfather's mouths, heard, I am proud of you, ever in my life. At 48, we don't even speak anymore. And I'm glad for it because I don't want fake parents. I don't want to call somebody mom that isn't a mother. And I certainly don't want to call him dad. I never did want to call him dad. But I was forced to because it put on the facade. It was, nobody needs to know he's not your real dad. So let's pretend. And, it's just really frustrating, though, that, my brother was born and that's all he had to do. He got it right from the beginning because, like you said, he had the right DNA. And me, it didn't matter what I did or didn't do. It was just automatically wrong. And it's hard to grow up that way. And I'm just glad I never resented my brother for that. It wasn't his fault that he was born to such a dysfunctional goddamn shit show. Forgive my language.
No, go on.
It was just,
Right.
it wasn't his fault. He was being brought into the situation, but I wasn't going to hold it against him. As a matter of fact, I realized very quickly when he came into the house that I felt a duty, an obligation to him to protect him from these two people who clearly had chosen not to be my parents. And I was afraid he was going to do something wrong, to get the same kind of reactions out of them. So I thought, whatever it is, no matter what happens, I'm going to love him, protect him, keep him secure, keep him safe, do all the things that they didn't do for me, because I was not going to let that little boy grow up like I did. And you know what? He has had the most wonderful life, and I am so happy for him. It's just a shame that at this point, he's in his early 30s. He has been basically brainwashed by them against me. So as much as I'm glad that he loves his mom and dad, I mean, I really am. I'm not saying that snarky. I am glad that he had a different life experience with them than I did. But it's just a shame to me that, if he knew how strongly I felt, and I mean, I delayed there were a couple times where I did throw my body over his to protect him from his father that was laying hands on him when it wasn't deserved. So I just wish that my brother could see the truth, and I'm not going to be the one to spoil it for him, though, because that's one thing people say, well, why don't you tell him? Why don't you send him a copy of the book but my thing is, if you thought your life was perfect, if you loved your parents and had this idea about them, I don't know. I just can't be that person that shatters that and causes him that kind of mental distress and to question everything. So I just let them all be. The three of them are a very happy family, and I'm just not part of it. It just really sucks.
Well, I pray that he'll come around, and, everyone he's got trauma. He's got to process his trauma on his own time. And, we're about the same age. You learn a lot in your 40s, man. So when he has kids, maybe some things will come back to him, or something will spark a light.
Yeah, you never know. Or they won't, and that's fine. I just,
Yeah.
like I said, whatever happens, and I'm not saying this to be like noble. I truly, like, I think that anybody that's had a bad childhood, you don't wish that on anybody.
Yeah.
I think what bothers me so much about it, aside from the fact that I was the kid, the kid that wasn't wanted, because it's a crappy feeling, but like, this happens in other families. I always refer to this book. It's a phenomenal book. It's called A Child Called It. It came out, I think, in 1991. It was a true story written by a man. He was the child they called it, but he was one of 5 children in this California home. The mother was the only one abusing him, but she didn't abuse any of the 4 other kids. She only abused him. And the father knew it was going on, turned his head just like my mother and said, oh, just try not to upset her, try not to, he would even take the other kids away when the abuse was occurring, knowing the abuse was occurring, instead of stopping the abusive parent. And it's just so sad to me that, I mean, we're not the only 2 people in this world that happened to, but what a terrible thing. Like, I almost would feel better. I'm just going to say it, as terrible as it sounds. Like, my parents were crappy parents to me. Like, if they were crappy parents to my brother too, that would I don't know, I guess made me feel better in a
Like
way.
power
Like,
in numbers, right?
well, it would just be like, okay, you're shitty parents. Whereas when you are the one being mistreated and the other one is being glorified and exalted, clearly the issue is you. So how do you not, especially when you're a kid? I am growing, developing, I'm a teenager, I'm trying to figure life out and figure out who I am. And the message I'm being sent is that there's something wrong with you. We cannot possibly love you. Well, no freaking wonder that I went out into the world thinking nobody else, who the hell else is going to love me? I didn't even love myself, because how could I when the 2 people who were supposed to couldn't even do it? Jesus, even, these serial killers, they can kill and rape and dismember how many people, but mom's always sitting behind them in court knowing her kid did something wrong, but that's her kid and she sits by them in court. And mine, my God, mine would probably be the one dismembering me and doing those things to me. It's just awful.
So how do we now meet Prince Charming that you call your ex-husband? Like, where do you meet this guy?
I worked in real estate. He walked into my office. And so it wasn't, I mean, it was a very, short and not, there wasn't much to this interaction. But I, coming from the childhood I came from, I learned very quickly how to read a room. Like, anybody that walks into my life, whether it's on a video screen like we are now or in person, I mean, we all make judgments within seconds, but I am so hyper vigilant about assessing my safety level and assessing any threats and getting vibes from people, because I need to notice every bit of nonverbal and verbal communication and get a sense of what this person's mood is and what's going on. And everything about him was, he was aloof, he was arrogant, which I couldn't figure out because he wasn't much to look at. And I mean, there was nothing like visibly that, even the vehicle that I saw him pull up in and like, there was nothing that gave it. I mean, like, forgive me for the very poor reference, but it's not like this was like Donald Trump where you could tell this was somebody of some sort of status or some kind of, wealth, level of wealth that wanted to be bowed down to. None of it made sense to me, but he acted like he was some kind of a god that was entitled to servitude. And I was just like, you're like everybody else. Like, there's nothing that special about you.
Right.
So I didn't give into it and I didn't like it. But then when he returned and expressed interest, again, here I am thinking, going back to my old ways, going back to being my mother, who I didn't want to be anything like, saying, oh, well, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm being judgmental. Maybe I'm being superficial. Maybe it's me. It's all about what I think, and something's wrong with the way I'm thinking. Instead of a normal person thinking, this person just isn't part of my tribe. This just is not my people, and that's okay. The world goes round. We don't all have to get along perfectly. We can all get along politely, but sometimes we just don't mix. But this man showed interest in me. I gave in, agreed to go down to his apartment one night and proceeded to be disrespected in so many ways. That's the first chapter of the book that's out. And that's something that I've had a lot of people that cringe, just even after that first chapter, that they just feel like, my God, you must have really thought so little about yourself to have let this man spit beer all over you, douse your clothes, and then basically take sexual advantage of you. But I take accountability because I didn't know what else to do. I mean,
Was he
I
drunk?
will never.
Was he like
Very.
hammered? Oh God.
Beyond. But when the sexual stuff was taking place, I didn't stop it either because I didn't want to. I didn't want to with him, and I didn't like how it was happening. But at the same time, there was this part of me that's like, oh, but he wants me. Somebody wants me. So it was effed up, because I can't say it was rape, because I laid there and let it happen because he wanted me. And I thought, well,
Yeah.
this is what men like, isn't it? Maybe if I let him have this, maybe then he'll love me. How sad is that? And I was 19 years old, and, it makes me sad to think, like, now that I have my own kid, and his girlfriend is 19, and I just look at her sometimes and think, I look at, I love my son's girlfriend, FYI. Just a little tangent. I absolutely adore her. But I look at her and just think, like, my God, she's so naive and so young and so sweet. And, you have your whole life ahead of you. And yet when I was that age, I laid down and let a man spit beer all over me, disrespect me, take advantage of my body sexually when I was not really wanting to give that consent, because I thought that made me worthy of I thought maybe then he would like me. Maybe then I'd be worthy of somebody loving me and giving me attention. And that's just not, shame on my mother and shame on my stepfather for putting me out into the world like that, with so little self-respect. So, it's a terrible thing, but the good news, and I do like to emphasize to people, the good news is, am I all healed and everything? Well, we've gotten there. We've come to terms with a lot, at my age, and more recently than ever, more so in writing my books than anything else, because it is very healing to write about those things and to really delve into them in such detail that you have to kind of really think about it, in ways that you never thought of before. But I don't want anyone to ever think that they're broken or damaged or any of those other terrible things we say about ourselves, because I certainly know what that feels like. And I have certainly felt it. And I have even been so low at many, many points in my life that I just didn't even want to be anymore. And that I actually wished and prayed that I would have the nerve to take my own life, because I just didn't want to live anymore. I just didn't want to live this life anymore. I wanted to click my heels and wake up somewhere else, but that doesn't happen in reality. So, people need to know, though, that there's hope. And just because you're in certain circumstances, for me, it was 45 years of nonstop bombardment with other people's shame. But I think once you do realize that it is other people's shame, and that is what's causing them to treat you that way, that they're basically just refusing to acknowledge their own trauma and to take accountability for it. So they just dump it on somebody else. And I apparently was the dumping ground for everybody. And once I figured out a few years ago that I don't have a reason to be ashamed. Yes, I have mental health issues. Who the hell doesn't? I have right? I have physical health issues as a result of my mental health issues. that really sucks. I mean, I have an oxygen machine standing by because the last time I did a long podcast the other day, I got dizzy and woozy, out of breath, and just, it was not good. But that's why I have an oxygen machine. But you know what? The thing is that life goes on, and it's not always ugly. There's a beautiful life, a joyous life. Like, I'm remarried now, and God, I don't even know that I deserve him, but I will hold on to him dearly. I mean, there's the codependent in me clinging on to him because this man is gentle and kind, but more than anything, he respects me, probably more than I respect myself most days. He loves me, even though he has seen me at my absolute worst in fetal position, sobbing in the corner of a dark walk-in closet. He doesn't judge me. He doesn't shame me. He takes me as I am, and he helps lift me back up and get me back on my feet and brush myself up. And you keep moving forward. You keep going forward, because there's more to life than all that crap people do to you, and more than what they put on you. And you don't have to deal with other people's shame. You just got to kind of fix yourself. Just like we kind of, some people work out to keep in physical shape. You just got to sometimes fix some stuff mentally and work yourself out that way to enjoy life a little more.
And this is why I call you a guide now. So you have your book, Gasping for Air, right? Yeah. I always say, go find your guides, go find your village, because you're not the only one that's gone through this. You're brave to talk about it,
Well, and somebody has to.
Well, yeah, right. And there's no shame, because we know shame. And trust me, there's nothing you can say to me that, like, guilt and shame, I got it for everyone on the planet 1,000 times over. Trust me, I'm good, right? And so with your husband, though, so this horrible date goes on. You married the guy, like, no offense or anything. So, and then you stayed married for like 30 years?
20, yeah, we were together 25 years.
Okay, 25. So, that's a long time. And I'm not, please don't take that like the wrong way. But
no, I don't take it the wrong way. I don't take it the wrong way at all. And here's what I'm going to tell you, because nobody gets married to get divorced. But people have to remember, like, we have this idea, like, you find the one and you get married and it's happily ever after. Well, let's be real. And I'm just going to say it. People get married for reasons that have nothing to do with the other person. I mean, there's the obvious, like, there's people that get married because you got somebody knocked up. There's people who got married because somebody has money. There's people who marry somebody so they could stay in the country. It's not always this glorious, magical, fantastical thing called love. God, I wish it was. I wish it was all the time. Did I think when I married him that it was a good idea? No, I did not at all. Did I hope that things would work out? Absolutely, 100%. And I'll be honest with you, even though I'm remarried, I'm just going to say it because that's who I am. I mean, I do wish that things had worked out with my ex. I mean, nobody actually gets married to get divorced, okay? Mm-hmm. And we had a kid. You want to keep things together. But, there were other things. That's why, like, when people say, well, if it was so bad, why did you stay? Why does anybody stay? There's like a million reasons why people stay. I mean, the obvious one is most families, most couples are living to their fullest financial extent. Most people don't have money for a whole other household and all the utilities and insurance and all this stuff. Most people don't have, money for that extra vehicle. Maybe two people are sharing a vehicle. I don't know. There's pets, there's kids that need to be divided. In our situation, we actually lived on a little farm. So, I mean, people can make fun of it and say it's not an excuse, but yeah, other than dividing the one kid we had pets, we had cats, we had dogs, we had pigs, we had cows, we had chickens, we had, there was a lot there. It wasn't, you don't just up and walk away. I couldn't, and he traveled for work. So literally, I could not just up and walk away and leave all these animals to just, roam the pastures by themselves.
You're going to have the SPCA, PETA, everybody in your business. You're going to be in a lot of trouble.
I was a member of PETA. Like, I can't do this. Right? So, but there's the other million reasons as well. And one of them for me, and I think a lot of people can relate, when you get married, whether you get along with the other family or not, they're your family. You know, there's a connection there. And with my ex, you know, part of the appeal before we got married was when I met his parents. His mother and father, they were like Mr. and Mrs. Cleaver, you know, from the just the nicest, just they were just so warm and welcoming and accepting and support. I mean, like literally, I felt like I was like on a 1950s TV show anytime I was with them. Like you just hear the music in the background and they're patting your back, giving you the pep talk and telling you how great you are and building you up, and just the loveliest people. And especially his dad. Oh my God. I wanted his parents. I wanted his parents, and his sister became my best friend. I had always wanted a big sister, and you know, she had kids and I was the one's godmother, and like,
so you're
wasn't
living
gonna walk
with
away from that.
like the jerk, but being with this family coming from being a place of beyond broken, is it
They
a
made
matter
me
of
feel
lesser of the evils? Like I could take his jerktivity, but I really like this. This is what I always wanted.
Yeah, they made me feel whole. I had the parents I always wanted. I mean, his dad used to introduce me to people as his daughter, not his daughter-in-law. It would throw people, and he did it as partly as a joke because people knew I was married to his son, so they would look at us oddly like there was incest. No, but no, but it was a very loving relationship. I was so close to them. I talked to my mother-in-law several times a week. I would go there and visit. We would go out. I mean, we were so connected. His sister, the same thing. She, like I said, she became my best friend. We would go on trips together. We would go shopping together. We were on the phone constantly. She was the first person I told about anything. And, you know, so to me, part of me was like, well, he can't possibly be this monster that I think he is, to come from a family like that. And then the other part of me was like, yes, what you just said. It's a little bit of a price to pay to have this family I always wanted. And with him, it wasn't always bad either. And I think that was part of why I didn't recognize it as narcissism or even as abuse for many years, because in my childhood, it was just like, they didn't want any part of me. They didn't even try, right? Only if it was in front of other people did they pretend to love me or be a parent. But with my ex, there was this constant push and pull. It was literally a love-hate relationship. He would love me until I did something that he didn't like, or said something that he didn't like, or told him he couldn't do something like, I don't know, sleep with other women and stuff like that. Then I would pay the price. Oh yeah, that was a big issue. But then I would pay a price, and then he hated me. And the problem with it, and this is what people don't get about narcissists and why the abuse is so, you know, it's not about just leaving because something happens. Because when I look at the first incident, the first physical incident that happened with us, it was about 2 or 3 weeks into our dating relationship. He threw a CD across the room at me, you know, very, very violently, trying to whip me in the head with it because he was mad. But 25 years later, we had escalated to guns being shot and knives being, you know, and death threats and police and all this kind of stuff. So how do you get from point A to point B? Because those are two very different things. This is what narcissistic abuse is about. It's called insidious abuse, because so he whipped the CD across the room. I didn't like it. I walked out and said, no, sir, I'm done. But then he came, oh, I'm sorry, it'll never happen again, and all this crap, right? And I thought, benefit of the doubt, let's keep going. But every time something bad happened, so to speak, it was just a little bit worse, right? It just crossed that line a little bit to where it wasn't a deal breaker, but you didn't like it either. But addressing it brought more problems, so you didn't address it. So you see, you have this like teeter-tottery thing where you're just like, but then you keep going. And then something else happens because they've already gotten away with this, this, and this. So now they're going to do something a little worse. Then they get away with that. Then they get away with that. And the part of the problem is that they do tend to go with people who have no boundaries and who tend to be people pleasers, as I was. And even though I thought in my head I had boundaries, and I think we all do, just some of them are a little further out there in the horizon where we can't even see them. But I think the problem is that, we have people that say, well, if my husband did that, if my husband cheated on me, well, I don't even know, honestly, I've lost count of how many times, Max, before we were married, after we were married, like, I don't even know. I stopped asking. I didn't even care who he was with when he would waltz in the next day and like, whatever. It wasn't me. So thank you, Jesus. Right. So the problem is that I don't even know where I was going with this. I
Well,
get
it's like a
lost in my
stepping
mind
stone
sometimes.
because I've talked about it. I think, like, I swear, like we make the joke like we are the same person. I've seen this movie. This is and when you're talking getting a CD thrown across the room at you, I had a nightstand thrown at my head, right? So you don't go like you don't start with the nightstand. There's a stepping stone.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And I'm not no peach, right? I've thrown stuff, right? I've thrown stuff, not a nightstand, but like, and not at somebody. I've thrown something at the wall or something, or hit a wall or swore my face off. But when the nightstand comes at you, and the next time the dresser comes at you, you're like, yeah, that seems right. Like,
yeah. But to tag on to what you just said as well, I mean, that's one thing I've said throughout my relationship with him was that I hated who he turned me into, because I did so many things in that marriage that were so uncharacteristic of who I am that I'm ashamed, but I'm not ashamed because I think that there's extenuating circumstances. And, part of writing my book, I remember when I sent the first version to the publisher, she said, okay, we love you. We love your book, but here's the thing. She said, the villainous husband who perpetrates, this and that on the poor victim wife, boo-hoo, it's been overdone and done and done again. She says, we like you, we think the world of you, but you were no angel. What did you do? And I was like, oh, I didn't do anything. He did all these wrong things to me. But guess what? It takes two to tango. We weren't doing the tango. That was for damn sure. It was straight up war. But, that was one part of writing my book that I feel that a lot of people have resonated with, is with what you just said, that we're in these situations. And I mean, we are essentially just like in survival mode sometimes. I mean, yeah, there were things, when the crowbar came swinging at my head, a normal human being would think, oh my God, he tried to kill me. I'm going to leave and I'm going to call the cops and I'm never returning, nor am I letting him anywhere near my son ever again. Well, I was with him for 15 more years after that. Why not? Because there were so many other things. Just like that, I think that's where I was going before, just saying that people say, oh, well, somebody cheated on me. Well, guess what? You say, if somebody did this, then I'm done. The problem is we all have that thing. We all have that deal breaker. But if you ask somebody what it is, they might give you an answer. They might say, oh, yeah, if he cheats on me, or if they do this, or if they do that. But I'm going to tell you right now, when you're in the situation, you find out real fast what your deal breaker is or isn't. I couldn't have even told you what mine was until it actually happened. And that's where the end of my 25 years with him came, was when I physically got sick. I dropped down to 93 pounds. I ended up on a backpack oxygen machine. I had about 24 random symptoms from neurological, digestive, cardiovascular, muscular, you name it. Turns out I had a rare lung disease that's like having COPD and fibromyalgia all at once. And just for fun, I had so much cortisol running through my body that my white blood cells thought that they had to eradicate something awful, that they ended up killing themselves off. So then I'm autoimmune on top of everything else. So that was when I decided. I remember my doctor sitting me down at the end of 2019 and saying, your body is literally shutting down, Dana. Like, I could barely move, I could barely breathe. And for people to get a perspective, I have always been very healthy. I'm one of those weirdos that like ran 5 miles every morning, coached cross country at the school, ate apples and hard boiled eggs and chicken and, high protein. And I didn't do like chips and cakes, and I was just a very healthy person. This shouldn't be happening to me. I could not make sense of it. But the doctor was like, literally, stress can kill you. This is because of cortisol. It is because that stress hormone that has been running through your body. And I admitted to him then, well, it wasn't just with my marriage, like it's been a volatile marriage, but I had a tough childhood too. And they're like, well, that's what's going on with you. For decades, you have had so much cortisol running through you. And I realized too, and this is something to go back to that scientific aspect of that trauma bond. I just recently found out that if you are pregnant, your cortisol, that stress hormone, is actually being fed into your baby as well. So there are babies that are born craving that cortisol, craving that chaos. So we talk about transgenerational trauma. It's not just in the environments we're raised in, it's in our biology. Yeah. And it's kind of scary to think that, because now I think back, like my mother did have a tough childhood. So did my stepdad, but we all know I'm not his biological child. But my mother, I think I very strongly believe that there was a cortisol situation, probably our only connection that we will ever have, that I inherited from her, and that my body has this craving. So I've had to actually work very hard mentally and to overcome the physical urges that make me want to behave in ways to get my cortisol going. As such, the catch-up story with my current husband, because there are still times where it's like, things are too good. And I used to think I just couldn't be happy. Like, why couldn't I just accept happiness? Why can't I just accept peace? It goes back to a biological, like your body is so addicted to this cortisol that it's just like, no, things are too good. I got to go screw it up.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and
so
it's true. They call me Hurricane Heather for a reason, right? I earned that nickname, right? But it's true. And I
before.
I married the same men as you. My husband will not fight. My husband looks big biker guy, tattoos everywhere. You don't want to run into him in a dark alley, right? Nicest guy ever. Does he fight? Yeah. No, not at all. Yeah. Heather, big mouth over here. Yeah, let's fight about the cat. And it's not about the ketchup. But I do have a question. When you were talking about that cortisol being transferred to the babies in womb, do you worry that happened to your son?
I do, but I keep an eye on it. I think the more important thing for all of us that can relate to any part of this is to be aware. Because here's the thing. I used to worry. And like, I look at my grandma now, I mean, believe me, there's trauma there too. I am positive that there was cortisol transfer from my grandma to my mother, because my grandma actually has lived a horrific life with, I don't even call him my grandfather because I never really knew him, but just horrific. It was awful for them. But yeah, I absolutely do worry, but I think it's important, if you're aware of it, you cannot change the past. So like, you have to just not beat yourself up and worry about what you can't change. I mean, there is something to be said for that, but just be aware of it going forward. What I will say about that with regard to my son, and I can only speak from experience from my one child, because that's all I've got. Absolutely 1,000,000% I worry about it. And 1,000,000% because he was in that toxic situation for 17 years of his life. So, just like me, he grew up with it. But I'm not saying it's necessarily healthy or not, but for him, it has been effective up to now, and he's going to be 21 in a couple months, is that he doesn't tolerate unpleasance, if that makes any sense. He doesn't want, when emotions get escalated, he's out. And he doesn't make a thing. He doesn't tell anybody. He just removes himself from the situation. So like, I have a kid, like, he was never like in fights at school. He does not fight with people. He clams up sometimes. That's like the sign to me that something's going on, but he doesn't do it often. I can honestly say, and if it gives anybody any, consolation that your kid would be okay, he's doing really well. Socially, he has a lot of friends. He's like the pet at work. Everybody loves him at work, and he has an incredible work ethic and makes way too much money for his age. But he's built a beautiful life for himself. He bought his own house all on his own at 19 years old.
Wow.
He's got this really nice girl that we absolutely adore, and I'm very excited, and hopefully one day she'll be my daughter-in-law and they can have little mini me's and have babies. But he's doing really good. Like, I worried, and even because anybody that has a narcissistic ex, if you've had children with them, they use the children as pawns. My ex couldn't be bothered with our son. Even in the divorce, the only thing he fought me on was guns. He signed off on his kid. He didn't want any part of custody of our minor son. He didn't want to pay any of the medical bills, no part of his tuition, no part of his college. He was just like, hands off, not my kid. You wanted him. But he wanted to fight me about keeping his guns, which I did fight to get them taken away. When you're shooting at me with them, I do have a problem with you having them. So we had to go to court over that. But as far as his kid, he wanted nothing to do with his kid. But he tried like hell to pit my son against me. And I would never involve myself in that. When my son would come to me and say, Dad said this, or Dad said that, or why did you do this or that? I would just say, this is between you, or this is between me and your dad, not you. You just go live your life. I love you. That's all you need to know. Your relationship with your dad is over there, but that is not your concern. And you know what? He doesn't even know the half. And I mean that. Even though he lived under the same roof, he doesn't even know half of what happened and half of the stuff that was said, and the things he does know, he has told me straight to my face. He doesn't believe some of it that he's heard from other people. And I'm like, that's fine. I'm not going to sit here and defend it. And I'm not going to sit here and convince you. You just got to know I love you, and that I'm here, and that I'm your mother. And I just felt like showing him stability and consistency, and showing him too that you can live life joyfully. Like, even in the midst of all the crap that was happening, no matter how much I was dying inside, I made sure my son and I went on day trips, and we went on weekends away, and we had fun, and we laughed, and we watched cartoons together and felt those joys, because I didn't want him to think he had to define his life by the trauma and the abuse and the toxicity we were living in.
Yeah. Well, good for you. You're a better person than me, because my kid said something to me once and I was like, wait a minute. Let's just rewind here. But I really watch what I do say, because mine wasn't as like, you win, but like, I'm like right under here, right? Like, I'm not that far behind you, right? But so now you decide to leave. Where does that thought, because I agree, you don't know what you will put up with until you're in that situation. And you think you know everything. No, my friend. And some people have an understanding. We see it all the time with rich people, because I watch all those Beverly Hills people. I love that crap. But they have side pieces that they can have wives in different countries. Who the hell knows?
Oh, yeah.
But because if you come, I get it when you come from money. I guess that was like, I guess if you're rich, that's what you do. And everyone's okay and you live your own life because it's too expensive. It's cheaper to keep her, is the saying, right?
I've never heard that. I love it.
Oh, well, there you go.
That's great. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if what I can say from my experience is that I have seen all this narcissism. I mean, it can happen at the lowest levels of financial status, and at the very highest of levels as well. It's it's really interesting though. Like I said, you think there are things that you look from the outside, like looking at my grandma. My grandfather would bring women, like she would hear things in her living room, my grandma, and she'd come down and find her husband screwing somebody on their living room sofa, like over and over. Like when I was 3 years old, the reason I don't have a relationship, he's passed now, but I didn't really know him because when I was 3 years old, he wanted to take me out for an afternoon, and he took me to his neighborhood bar that he frequented and left me there to leave to go screw another woman that obviously wasn't my grandma, his wife. Yeah, I was 3 in Chicago, by the way, big city.
Like you were in the
Could
bar?
happen. Yeah, he just left me there.
Well,
and
I
he
know,
left
like
in
we used
his
to get
car.
left in the parking lot, no, in the car.
Yeah, I know. I mean, whatever. But thank God there was somebody there that knew him that took me home to my grandma because he knew where my grandpa lived, but he was busy, So, I mean, things like that, like, yeah, we're sitting here saying, oh my God, if that happened to me, there's no way. Again, you find yourself in those situations. So, yeah. So what happened for me was just when I realized when my doctor said, you got to do something. I can't give you a pill. I can't give you a surgery. Something in your life is causing you all this stress. And he wasn't sure what it was. He knew I was not happy in my marriage. I was never really too shy about that. But, even I hadn't realized that your marriage can affect your health. It could be a friendship. It could be a parent relationship. It could be any relationship, but to affect my health to the point that now I'm autoimmune and I have a lung disease and I'm suffering and my body is shutting down. He said, your body is doing everything it can just to keep your heart beating, to keep your lungs pumping. Other than that, nothing else was working. I mean, like I said, I had like my hands were going numb and he's like, your feet are going to go next. And I'm like, oh my God, like what, you're saying I'm not going to be able to walk? Like I'll be in a wheelchair? He's like, maybe. He's like, let me tell you this. My heart was at such a risk. I was at a 50% risk of congestive heart failure. Do you know how scary that is when you're otherwise healthy? And this is just because somebody is treating you like a piece of shit at home. I mean, it's very disconcerting. So to me, again, knowing, as I've shared before, that here I am, always been very healthy. And, part of that was because I developed an eating disorder because from the verbal abuse and a lot of commentary on my body and what I ate growing up. I was from a very young age, very, very healthy, an apple and a hard-boiled egg for lunch and drinking my water. And I don't want to drink my calories and diet everything and low fat. And, but you are telling me that my health, my body is giving out. Ding, ding, ding. You hit my deal breaker. My deal breaker. I didn't mind me being 93 pounds because when you're anorexic, that's like God handing you exactly what you want. It's like your wish coming true. And I'm just going to be real. I mean,
hey man, you're talking to the anorexic bulimic. I'm not going to disagree. Yeah.
I tried to be bulimic, but I couldn't.
Right.
Yeah. All right. That's the thing. But, I have struggled even with that. That's probably been harder than the mental distress to get past. As a matter of fact, just earlier this week, I saw somebody that I hadn't seen actually since she was there that day. I saw her the same day that I was told that my body was shutting down. So the last time she saw me, that's the condition she saw me in. I literally like 3 days ago ran into this acquaintance at a store. And the first thing she said, she didn't even recognize me. Because I said, oh, hey, so-and-so. And she just kind of looked at me like she had no idea who I was. And I'm like, Dana? And she's like, oh my God, you look so healthy. And I stopped and I thought that was weird. And then it kind of touched my heart because I'm like, okay, I've put on 10 pounds and, I've worked really hard to like eat when I'm hungry and not stick my finger in my mouth to get rid of it and, stuff like that.
But that's a coping mechanism though, really, right?
It's absolutely, it's to control. It's absolutely, I mean, especially when I was younger, I needed to control something. So if I
Yeah.
could control my diet and control my weight, and it was something it was predictable, and I was in control of it, whereas everything else going on around me was completely out of my control and out of control all on its own. But yeah, it's just one of those really interesting things, that for me personally, that's the thing that kind of pokes that bruise, is
Breathing.
that
You like
my
breathing?
health.
Breathing's my thing.
Breathing is my thing, and being healthy. And so that was my deal breaker. And you know what? For somebody, it may be the cheating, it may be infidelity. It's just so sad because I hear so many situations where, unfortunately, it goes on and it goes on and it goes on. It's not your deal breaker, but we all have one. And, it should be when somebody physically assaults you. It should be when somebody sexually abuses you. It should be when somebody financially drains you and inhibits your ability to have financial independence to be able to leave them. It should be a million things. But every single one of us is unique and comes from a different background. And there's something different about each of us that it's just going to be that one thing. And when it happens, by God, you'll know it. And for me, it was the health. And that's when I said, this man could take everything away from me. Lord knows he had taken everything. But I said, I'll be damned if he's going to take my life away from me. He is not going to let me die. I am going to live, because there is no way I'm going to let that bastard raise our son. I'm going to live so that I can get my son out of this. And, the key thing that I did that night, I remember I stayed in the basement at that point because I didn't trust even sleeping on the other side of the bed with him. So I slept on the basement couch. And I remember laying there that night thinking, like, but what do I do? What am I going to do? Where am I going to go? How's life going to be? And I asked, just simply, the question came up, what do I even want? Because the thing about narcissists that everybody can relate to, there are all these rules. So there's all these rules that are either spoken or unspoken. In my case, my ex, he actually wrote down rules for me a couple times, how to be a good wife, because I apparently wasn't one. But, you follow these rules thinking that you think that if you follow them, if you can please this person, they'll be better to you. They'll be kinder to you. Things will be okay. Because again, things aren't always they're not 100% horrible. There is some good sometimes. But the thing about these rules is that even if you do follow them, and even if they are pleased with you, they're always behind your back talking about all kinds of crazy things that aren't true about you, because they always know, no matter what, they're going to hit something. They're going to poke that deal breaker. They're going to hit it at some point, because sometimes they're not even sure what it is, because they get away with so much that they make sure that if you do ever leave, if you do ever say anything to anybody, that nobody's going to believe you. And part of, and this is going to go back, I'm sorry, there's so many tangents, but narcissism is, it's like a web of lies. It's like a spider web. But part of it is that they have to create a narrative that discredits you. They always go to the "you're crazy" thing. But part of the reason that I was able to stay so long also is because probably 15 years, maybe 16 or 17 years before our divorce, he had me so convinced that I was bipolar. I was so worried, like, I'm raising our son. What if I am bipolar? Like, forgive me. I feel terrible for all the things Britney Spears has gone through, but I'm seeing on TV, she's bipolar. She's shaving her head. She's doing crazy stuff. This is what the media is feeding us about bipolar disorder. So I'm like, oh my God, what if I do something crazy with our son? What if I'm not fit to be a mother? Because he's telling me I'm not fit to be a mother too. And so I go to the doctor. I go to a psychiatrist and I answer all the questions as I'm told by my husband that this is how I'm acting and this is how I'm feeling. I come home with 2 mood stabilizers for bipolar disorder, 2 of them. I was on them for 17 years. And can I tell you, when you're on these things, you don't feel, you acknowledge, like, you're like, I think I'm upset, but this is this is what you look like when you're upset. I think I'm happy. Shouldn't I be happy right now? But this is how you look when you're happy.
You're
You're just
tranquilized.
literally,
Yeah.
literally. I remember the first few times once the meds took effect on me, I remember like even the first time I was around my mother, she was looking at me weird because she was always accusing me of being sensitive and emotional. And all of a sudden I was just like stone faced and blank. And, you know, I had a friend that was like, this isn't you. Like, you're almost cold now. But I mean, think about that. If I was going through 17 years of my life numb, imagine everything that happened. There's probably stuff that happened that I don't even remember.
Yeah.
That probably horrifying that I was just like, oh, okay. You're gonna go screw somebody. I'll see you tomorrow.
All right.
Have a good night. Because that's eventually how it did feel. I mean, I do remember that happening a couple times, and that's so sad. But since I've been out of that, and since the doctor has now realized, you know, a few years ago that like, oh crap, we think we misdiagnosed you. Like you were just having a reasonable reaction to abuse and you weren't going up and down. You were just experiencing joy when you were experiencing joy. And obviously feeling very depressed because your husband was doing all these things to you, and you had your mother and stepfather on the side over here doing all this other stuff to you. So, I mean, it's hard for me. Like, I know there's a lot of people who had suffered narcissistic abuse that say they have ADHD or they're bipolar or they have this and that, or what do I have? Do I have BPD? I always tell people, who cares what you have? I'm not dismissing that you have something, but it doesn't matter what the label is. Deal with what you feel like. Because the thing is, you know, these doctors want to throw pills at you for stuff. And the pills, I think, did me a disservice. Because maybe if it wasn't numb, maybe if somebody would have seen what was happening, and I do take partial responsibility because I was the one that went there and never said anything because I was too scared to expose them. But imagine if I wasn't autoimmune. Imagine if I didn't have to have this oxygen machine sitting behind me on standby. Like you can hear the raspiness in my voice now. That's me losing breath. So like when I get off this podcast, I will probably be, I can't live. I forget sometimes that I'm not normal. They'll say, oh, you look good. You don't look sick. No, I don't look sick. It's makeup. Because I don't want to walk around looking like Chucky. You know, I mean, I'm not trying to be. So, you know, there's a lot to narcissistic abuse. I'm not invalidating anybody else's experience with other abuse, because like I said, in childhood, I absolutely experienced the physical and the verbal and the emotional, psychological, every other thing. But narcissistic abuse really messes with you because it is so complex and so involved, and it comes at you in so many directions that honestly, you can't process one thing before another thing's coming and another, and it's happening every single day of your life constantly. You never get a break from it. You can't breathe, literally.
Well, and you being tranquilized for a bunch of mood disorders, mental health that you don't have. I don't even want to. So that's not even like doing what it's supposed to be doing. So what is it doing to your body? Right. And you talked about the rules. Those rules change on a daily basis. So it doesn't matter if you did it to the T, they're going to find something to bitch about. Right. And it's crazy. So now you're probably taking more pills because you just did the list. And I don't know how else I'm supposed to do the list because it worked the last time, but now you're pissed. So
and you're absolutely right, because I had my other doctor, my family doctor, gave me Xanax for when I just needed a quick calm down. So now I'm on 2 mood stabilizers, and
Judy Garland. God.
Yeah, it's a wonder I wasn't drinking too.
Oh God, that really, you wouldn't have woken up.
Because the thing about that was my ex, I mean, since the day I met him, he would never ever say that he was alcoholic. He's an alcoholic, okay? I don't know if he still is. I mean, God love him, whatever. Glad he's gone. But, you know, when he was with me, so I was worried once we had our kid, it was like I wouldn't even have like a social glass of wine with dinner. Like I was just like, if something happened to that baby or you know, even when he was, somebody had to be sober enough to go to the hospital and not have him taken away from us, because Lord knows there were other reasons to take him away. But yeah, the rules are funny. I did a whole chapter on that in the book where, you know, that's kind of when I started. I think it was the second time he left me the written rules, which I still have to this day. I was referring to them for the book, and that's about when I started just like not caring anymore. Like I was done with him, done with the marriage, but not done enough to actually file for divorce. But yeah, it was like, I'm following your rules, but then he would change the rules on the spot if the rule that he put in place didn't serve him in that moment. Sometimes I was like, I don't even know if he knew what the rules were, because they would just change, or another rule would come in place, or there was an if this, then that, if that, then this. But what kills me now is that this list that I still have, and I bring it with me to book signings. You know, I haven't done one in a long time, but if anybody sees book signings for me, I usually have it with me. You can see I was checking it off like a list of chores. Like, how sad is that? But in my mind, I thought, if I please him, if I make him better, you know, and I've had some people that have said, well, you should have been stronger. If you had more support, you'd have been. Let me tell you, and I said this to one person in the middle of what I was going through. I remember somebody said something to me about being strong. And I said, you don't know anything about being strong, because if you knew what I went through on a daily basis, I am the strongest person. You know, walking away would be the easy part. That would be the easy. He might shoot me in the back, literally, but that would be the easy part. Because let me tell you, it's very, very hard. And it takes a very strong person to go through that, and to be raising a child, and go to work every day, and participate in the world like a functioning, normal human being, even though you have this whole mess of life going on at your house. It's exhausting.
And put on the facade everything's okay, because I can guess, I'm probably right. Nothing to see here. Everything's great. You said you're coaching track and field. You're probably down at your kid's school. You're probably on the PTA. You're probably like, everything's shiny, happy people here.
And I was that woman smiling with the cupcakes, handing out hot dogs. Yep,
there you go.
That was, and he was out there too. And everybody just, I would get so many people. What a great guy. What a nice guy. That's my favorite.
You're so lucky. You're so lucky to have a husband like that.
Yes, you've been told these things too. Yes, because he was charming and wonderful and generous and would do anything for anybody. Just he wanted me dead. So that was a little bit of an issue with me.
Yeah. Too bad Heather's crazy. Oh, so sorry. But, you know, so
Dana's crazy too.
I heard it all, man. So how do we heal now? So how do we come out of this traumatic situation? How do we heal?
So most people go to therapy and do normal stuff like that, but not everybody has money for therapy. You know, I was suddenly a single mother with a kid at a private high school, about to go to a private college that I was solely paying for. And I had the mortgage and these, you know, everything was on me, and we were good. But mom doesn't have money to go just sitting down with somebody and catching them up on everything that had happened over the first 45 years of my life so they could help me heal. So what I did to start with, it goes back to that question that I asked myself that night. It's been the magical question for me forevermore, is what do I want? Because I found myself, I mean, I'll never forget, even a few days after my ex moved out, I just remember being in my kitchen and like feeling like lost, because he had been dictating everything. He dictated what we ate, what I wore, the damn lipstick on my lips. He didn't like me reading, and I didn't even have a smartphone until like everything was dictated, just like my stepfather dictated everything for my mother when I was young. So it was like, I remember my son being like, you could do what you want. We don't have to
you
follow
have
his
no
rules.
list either. So what are you supposed to do?
Don't have a list, right? But and that's the thing, is that people that have met me or people that knew me, they're like, you're so strong, you're so independent, you're intelligent. It all sounds very nice. And I think it's accurate, description of me. But I was lost. I literally didn't know what to do without somebody telling me to do. Or I'd start doing something and my kid would be like, we don't have to do that anymore, Mom. He's gone. And I'd be like, oh. But then I'm like, I could breathe. So what I started with was that question, what do I want? What do I want for dinner? Because with him, there had to be a meat and two sides, but you couldn't have like a carb and a protein you couldn't have two consecutive meats on the next night and no leftovers. And I mean, it was like all these damn rules even about dinner. So it was like, what do I want for dinner? Maybe I just want ice cream for dinner. How about that? Like where I didn't have to worry about, well, he didn't like me wearing this, or he told me that lipstick made me look like a whore. Well, guess what? The whore is going out today with that lipstick on because I like it on me. I want to wear it. And it sounds really snarky and stupid to some people, but let me tell you that when you have basically subdued yourself, every part of your being in deference to somebody else, those little bits of who you are start to come out in giving yourself those permissions. So say, what do I want for dinner? Oh yeah, well, I want this because I like that. I wasn't allowed to buy root beer before because he didn't like the smell of it. It made him sick. Well, guess what? I love root beer. And my son, it's delicious. And let me tell you, we were having lots of root beer. So it sounds so childish, but it's also... It's like,
but you're like, I can't do that. Like, I'm going to do everything. Like, it's like going to Disneyland. What do you do with yourself?
Wild animal that was released from its cage. Yeah. Absolutely. But the idea of this that I want people to get is that it's about rediscovering yourself, because I got to paint my nails red without being accused of going out and cheating, or I could go to church without being accused of screwing my priest. And I could go out with my friends after work without somebody hounding me about when I'm going to be home. And like, it was so nice to just live life on my terms, because here is what I learned. One, oh, I matter. I didn't realize that until I started giving myself those permissions. And I had to have my 17-year-old son remind me that I didn't need anyone else's permission to do simple things like choosing what I wore and what I ate and who I could hang out with. But doing those things that were true to who I am and true to who I always had been, really allowed me to rediscover those parts of myself. And when you rediscover those parts of yourself and begin to live more authentically, your posture starts straightening. You're more firm in who you are. You start realizing that you have worth, and you start having more confidence, and it just starts coming back. Like there's still some fire inside of you. The embers were still there, but you just kind of got to blow on them and get them going again, and let them just take over and rage as they should. But the beauty of this is that, yes, therapy is always beneficial, but if you can't, just start with you, just saying, what do you want? And this did even help me when I was doing therapy, because my biggest problem was self-regulation. I would get triggered and dysregulate my breathing, and I'd almost have a panic attack, or this person said this, and oh my God, I'm ruminating for like 3 days and crying, and how could they do this to me? And oh my God, I needed to self-regulate, because let's be real. I mean, I remember telling my current husband, like, after my last panic attack, I'm like, I don't want to be like this. I don't want to have these. I don't want to be pushed to that point mentally, to where physically I am like literally wheezing for air. Like, this isn't fun. Nobody wants to be that way. So, sorry, it's getting so dark out now. So that's one thing that I always said is just ask yourself in those situations what you want. You know, when you're feeling like something is affecting you, when your breathing quickens, your heart rate is starting up, just say, what do I want? Do you need to feel protected? Do you need to feel safe? Do you need a hug from that person? Do you need a popsicle like a 2-year-old? I mean, not being funny, but whatever it is,
Yeah.
give it to yourself. Whatever it is, give it to yourself. If you need to walk away from that person, from that conversation, if you're at an event and you just got to get the hell out of there so you can breathe, get the hell out of there and go breathe and go home if you want to. And if you have a day, I remember last month I had a day that, I mean, I can normally be okay, but that day I just wasn't feeling it. Like it just wasn't a good day for me. I needed a break. I am not going to be any good to anybody at all, including myself, if I don't give myself that reset. So it's kind of like, recharging your stick vacuum. You just kind of sometimes take that break, Netflix and chill, stay in the pajamas all day. You'll do better tomorrow. But give yourself those indulgences. Ask yourself what you want, because I guarantee you 9 times out of 10, that will save you from the panic attack. It'll save you from dysregulating. It'll save you from saying or doing that self-sabotaging thing that you're about to do, even though you know what you're doing and you know it's not productive. It will help you. It will save you.
Well, and I highly recommend crying in the shower. My poor shower needs therapy, but it helps. That's where I went.
I'm going to try to turn the light on. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Right here. Okay, that's better.
You're back. And yeah, like, sometimes you just need a good cry, right? Cry it out. But
absolutely, I'm a big crier. I mean, now that I can feel and I'm not on those mood stabilizers, I do cry now. I probably have cried more in the last few years than I ever have in my whole life, but it feels good. They actually say it relieves cortisol and the effects of it when you cry.
Yeah, I totally believe it. So, God, we could talk for hours, but we'll have to have you back and make like a whole day event about it. Gosh, we should do a TED Talk or something, have a panel. So what would be your number one tip for people? What happens if they're saying, I don't know if I'm in this relationship? What's like number one?
Number one is if somebody is trying to control you in any way. Am I saying they're a narcissist or you're being abused? Not necessarily, but I don't care what relationship it is. When somebody is trying to control you, that is a message that they do not accept you as you are. They do not care about who you are authentically, naturally, organically as a human being. And it's also an insult to your ability to make your own adult decisions and act on your own accord. But if somebody is trying to change you or control you in any way, that is not somebody that I think is probably a good fit for you, no matter what the relationship is.
It's a good one. And in closing, what do you want your legacy to be?
My legacy, I think I just want, I think it's important, even though my son doesn't know everything that happened, I want him to just see my resilience and our resilience, our bravery, and that we have overcome. And I want that to be my legacy for everybody. I don't want people to be like, oh, that was the girl that was abused, or that's the narcissist lady. Even saying I'm an expert at narcissism, which some people introduce, like, I am just me. I am just a regular human being in this world trying to make it out alive and feel a little love and joy in the midst. But I do want people to see you are not defined by your circumstances. Rise above it, bloom, live, experience life as you should, but don't ever think that you are any less than anyone else, and don't let anyone else ever make you feel that, because really we all deserve love and we all deserve to live a very full life.
We do. And your book, Gasping for Air, where do we get it?
Most people go to Amazon. You can go to my website, danasdiaz.com. Click on the link. Facebook and Instagram links are on there as well. And you can also email me if you want to send me a personal message. I do respond to everybody myself. I don't have a robot or a human being that responds for me. So please do reach out.
Yes, and in closing, you are not alone. I will say it again. Dana is a guide. She is my sister from another mister. We are BFFs now. We're going to have a TED Talk somewhere. And go get her book. Go get her book. She is a helping, caring human being. And I don't want to kill her because she probably needs her air tank.
We're getting
God,
close.
you're going to live through all this except for an interview with me. And be like, God damn it, that Heather in Canada. Oh, God, she took her out.
No, all good. It's all good. Nothing an a compressor can't fix.
Awesome. Well, I send you all the love and I can't wait to have you back because we literally could talk for hours. And
Good.
thank you so much for your time.
It was an absolute pleasure.
That's all for this episode of 1% Better. To continue the conversation, head over to our website at www.1percentbetter.ca, where you can access more stories and resources. We'd also love it if you subscribed and left us a review on your favorite podcast platform. And remember, friends, progress takes patience, perspective, and sometimes a little help from people who get it. So be kind to yourself and others as we work to get 1% better every day. We'll see you back here next week.